Welcome, everyone. I think exciting day. I think starting at the top, the most exciting thing is that we've reached the point where we feel confident in sharing at least a time frame for launch. So we will be launching exploitation in summer of this year. Um, it's been a road. It's been a longish road. A lot of change. A lot of working with the limitations in front of us being a blockchain enabled game, working with Starknet, understanding their timeline, aligning ours with that. And ultimately, I think we're finally at the point where we feel confident enough to share that time frame. So I'm really excited. I think it's going to be an exciting summer. And we have a lot in store, obviously, based on what we shared this morning, leading up to that point. So first and foremost, outside of the announcement of that time frame for launch, we are going to open up in April 11th two sales. The first one is Asteroid sales. So we're going to give the pretty sizable increase in community size an opportunity since the last sale to be able to participate and go and find their perfect asteroid so they can be ready on day one. Just so everybody's aware, I went and took a look at the numbers again. The community is depending on where you look, sometimes somewhere between 3 and 5 times as large as it was at the end of the last sale. So there's a lot of new people here. And if you take a look at kind of the ownership level for asteroids and crewmates, it certainly seems as if there are a lot of people who would be interested to have that opportunity to buy more or to buy for the first time an asteroid so that they can be prepared. The second half is a Sway sale. So it's the launch of the Sway token that we have been discussing here for roughly the last year, maybe a little bit less. We've worked a lot on the tokenomics for Sway. We've released a version 2 of that document that we feel like has simplified and streamlined a lot of the tokenomics while still adhering to all of our original goals. It's still intended to be the primary entry and exit point for influence. It is still intended not to be speculative and to grow with the player base. And I think that we're doing everything we can to stay true to those goals. And so, we want to make sure that for those people who are part of the community today, that rather than kind of getting caught up in the rush of launch with what we hope will be a large number of new players that are net new to influence and all getting involved at the same time, we want to give everybody here an opportunity, along with their asteroid, to get the Sway they feel they need to get started quickly and really be a major part of launching this new economy. Honestly, one of the things I'm most excited about is watching, hopefully participating in a limited way as a player, this new economy grow from nothing over the first few weeks. And so the way we've organized this is that the asteroids or crewmates will be key to being able to participate in the Sway sale. Each of those will entitle you to be able to purchase up to $2,500 US dollars worth of Sway. I don't assume that all of you will take advantage of all that, but for those of you who own, for example, fewer larger assets, that may be in your interest to have enough of an allocation there to get what you need. So yeah, I mean, like we've had, I think, pretty consistent goals from the beginning. We've used this opportunity to make a lot of solid decisions around various pieces that have been up in the air, that have been talked about here and there over the last 2 years. Specifically, that applies to the arrival sales starter packs that have been now fully defined. And we've been sharing some of those skinned ships that are going to be available on day one to the holders of those asteroids, as well as the Arvad crewmate crew assignment Sway and the allocation of that and how that will be claimable on April 11th. So I think a lot of decisions have been made. I hope that in general they are well received. I think that they have been so far. Admittedly, you can never make everybody happy, and I get that, and I'm not expecting to, but I think overall we've tried to make decisions that serve the influence community and the game that we're building in the best way possible. And I hope we've accomplished that. So yeah, I mean, JP, unless there's a lot of other pieces that you want to discuss, I'm happy to get into questions fairly quickly because I imagine there will be a lot of them.
Yeah, let's hop into questions here shortly. I do want to give one shout out, or multiple shout outs, but the ACC round 5 just ended. There were a lot of really good entrants to that, and I just want to, encourage anyone here who wants to be, a bigger part of the community and help us, either reach more people or build tools for the community to do so. Round 6 is started. It's going to end in a few months. And that will be in line, pretty close to probably phase 4, or at very least, near then. And so I think it's a really good opportunity for you guys. You can earn some sway. And I know there's a lot of new creators in here that are kind of stepping up to the plate. So excited to see your guys' entries there. But I don't want to take too much time away from kind of the main topic today. So again, thank you guys. And yeah, why don't we just dive into questions about, what's going on for those who know what's going on or have questions to better understand it.
It's pointed out that it was quite northern hemisphere biased of us to announce summer as the time frame. I think
yeah.
it's a good point.
Get a message actually from Sherdaxi asking very specifically, what does summer mean in terms of months? So we might need to.
Yeah, we'll add some clarification in our documentation about that.
Yeah, we'll put some dates in there.
Certainly, it could be easy to think that, oh well, you meant southern hemisphere summer, which would be quite a few months longer.
Yeah, we're keeping it vague for that reason. No, not at all. Okay, so for questions though, feel free to raise your hand. We can bring you on stage and you can ask the question or type it in to the chat here. I will also try and monitor general and other channels if questions get stuck in there, but trying to keep it into one place would be great. So, I think there's been a few questions already asked and answered, but it might be good to just cover them a little bit. Proto, I know you've been doing a good job about answering those. Is there anything that you want to maybe just call out?
Not particularly. I think people have been asking, good questions, but fairly detailed ones that don't necessarily need to be shouted out to everyone. It is worth pointing out that, yeah, we'll have a specific range of what summer means, but we're being intentionally vague with that date range. We're not saying either the beginning or the end of that range. When we do release it, or do say it, it's just somewhere in there.
As our confidence increases in providing specific dates, we will continue to refine that. You will all be the first to know.
Yeah, and somebody did ask about when testing phase 4, whether we have any more information about that given this release. I think I can just interpret that it's between the sale and the launch.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about, or just briefly about kind of our plan for how we will roll out. Somewhat technical, but we'll start to roll out our phase 4 contracts in the server, and it might not be quite visible yet, but we'll start to do that likely 2 weeks from now when Cairo 1 is rolled out onto StarkNet. Pretty quickly then you will start to see that we are rolling out truly the way that we expect to for mainnet for production. So we'll try to be testing all the exact same things, effectively a dry run. So you'll again on phase 4 see bridging first, for example. That will be live. You'll be able to play with that again. And then ultimately L2 will be live. StarkNet contracts will be live, and you'll be able to start there. We will also do a dry run, just like we will have for production, where those of you with crewmates in phase 4 will have access first. You'll get kind of a first look, and then we'll open up the sales of asteroids just as we will in production. and people will be able to acquire those crewmates at that time, and start to play on phase 4. And we'll just kind of continue that rollout. We will also be testing, and ultimately using that test to inform how we tweak the rollout of seeded items, seeded buy orders. We are developing a plan for that now. Discussions are kind of ongoing, but you'll get to see a lot of that, and I think glean a lot of information from how we roll out phase 4. It should inform quite well for how we roll out ultimately on production.
And it's worth noting that the Asteroid sale on April 11th will be on Layer 1, and it will look very similar to what you guys have seen if you were there for the Populate the Belt or the rifle sales. It will look very similar to that. It'll be the same, our old game client. It won't be the new updated one. So just to set expectations, that's more or less what it will look like. It's probably going to be the very last, definitely going to be the last sale on Layer 1. Future sales will be on Layer 2.
Yes. And actually, that's a good point. A good point you bring up. A lot of these decisions have focused around how we can simplify the sort of cross-chain data, what needs to be seeded, what doesn't need to be seeded. Ultimately, we try to allow decentralization and immutability to guide our decisions about that. And so we've done a lot of work to try to limit what is on the Unstoppable Games team to rehydrate into StarkNet, to ensure that the bridge and the existence of data across L1 and L2 is more robust.
Hey, Chris, I think a really good question maybe that you might want to cover is, what would a successful launch look like for us? And, do you have anything that you want to mention around that?
Yeah, so I think a successful launch has, a lot of factors. Certainly, if I'm thinking about Sway and the tokenomics, I would like to see Sway not swing wildly in price. I'd like to see it be attractive and stable enough for new players to get involved without worrying overly that the price of the sort of entry level goods that they need to get started will change drastically. Now, obviously, we have some levers to pull, given that we are seeding some goods initially to try and prevent that from occurring. But we do want to roll off our involvement as quickly as possible, and so I think a certain amount of gameplay occurring on Idalia Prime is required for that market to be robust enough to kind of continue on with fairly stable price for these things. Exactly what player numbers that would entail, I'm not 100% sure, but I very much hope to see 10,000 plus players playing first week. I hope that we reach more than that, but I think it's a very achievable goal for us, and I think we'll form a really strong basis to grow from there.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, I will say, because I know in your question you mentioned kind of like social buzz, marketing, things like that. Yeah, we're working really hard on, what I would consider like activations and bringing people in. I think another important factor for this game is to make it easy for people to get in and play, and not just from a price point, but from understanding the game. I think there's definitely some work needing to be done on our end, and then to empower creators to create things that are going to help players. So these games are not simple. If you've ever played 4X games like Paradox Interactive Studios games like Crusader Kings or whatnot, or EVE Online, or even Stellaris or things like that, like these are games that you literally spend multiple hours just trying to figure out everything that there is, get started, and trying to bring that down to as little time as possible to start having fun, and then taking the time to learn and master the game is really important. And I'm definitely going to be pushing those types of activities and incentives and all kinds of other things pretty heavily here in the near future. So again, I think that's just maybe a little less important than kind of what Chris was saying, but I think also we definitely want to make sure that this game's approachable.
I think it's all important. I mean, ultimately, the best measure of success is well, number one, are people having fun, and then number two, how many people are having fun. We want more of each, and I think all of those things funnel into ultimately those metrics, and then finally those metrics funnel into the long-term development and growth of the game. So yeah, I think those are all important. I did want to answer a question about tokenomics. Can you tell us a bit more about how the 30 billion sway allocated to unstoppable games will be used? Yes. So in two ways. The first is that the ALIN pool that we have discussed that will support the sale on the 11th will be seeded with half of that sway. And then ultimately at launch, we'll be taking the remainder, likely putting it into one of the decentralized exchanges. Maybe Uniswap is there, who knows, Zigzag. There's a lot of options. There's also kind of various different options that aggregate those markets as well. And then we'll be pulling that sway in to the starter packs and the influence store that sits on the influence client. So effectively, that sway will go to seeding those starter packs and helping new players, ensuring that there's liquidity for new players to get involved with sway right away.
So a key point there is that our intent is to basically sell it as soon as possible.
Yes.
We're not holding onto this way. It's not a speculative asset for us. It isn't at all, period. But we're not using it as such either. We're trying to use it to bootstrap the game's startup.
JP, that's a great question from Humming.
Yeah, sorry, I'm responding to other questions, other places. Okay, sorry, Proto, did you just read the question? I'm
Sure.
doing
Yeah. It might not be the exact right time for this, but in your opinions, how can we in the community best help bring attention or new players to the game? That's a great question, Homie.
Oh yeah, fantastic question. I think, yeah, this is a huge thing that I've been working on. So look, everyone who is here, whether or not you own something, sharing influence on social, sharing influence with your friends, I mean, that's hugely helpful. If you're willing to go outside of that and want to do more, then that would be something where, maybe take some of our posts or some of the content that we're dropping and put it into something more digestible or something that you think would excite more people and share that online. Now, if you're wanting to go above and beyond and you want to do full on, content creation, something like Gnarly Narwhal, who has been building incredible content along with some others and posting that on YouTube, that's going to be another huge avenue. Twitch and YouTube coming up are going to be extremely helpful for players to onboard into this game, and it also helps with exposure. So if you want to become a content creator, it's a huge opportunity, in my opinion. Web3 games are still very niche. There's not a lot of people playing these games yet, and we're going to be doing our best to grow that audience as much as possible. But we could use your guys' help. And when you do that alongside us, you'll get promoted on our channels. We'll promote you as much as possible. But it's kind of a win-win for all of us. You grow your audience, we grow ours. And over time, we have a much larger pool of people that are not afraid of the term Web3. And hopefully, with what we're doing with influence, Web3 can be in the background as much as possible, where you're not really even thinking about blockchain anymore. Sorry, I might be going a little too deep on this, but I think about this a lot.
No, I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, like, we will absolutely support any content creators in our community. In general, coming from the community already, you will have much better knowledge of the game, much better knowledge of StarkNet, much better knowledge of getting involved in Web3 in some way, than like your typical Web2 or just generally traditional gaming influencer, who first of all has a big wall up about anything blockchain in a lot of cases, certainly anything NFT, which is part of why we rarely use that term anymore. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times they're going to be missing out on exciting projects. Ultimately, good games. The crap came first. Not surprising, but I think they will end up missing out on good games at first because they have this sort of mental block. But all the better for people who are content creating within the community already. Please do so. We will absolutely support you in any way we can. Initial supply, isn't 97 billion too much? I think I will say I think it doesn't matter. Ultimately, we chose numbers that were on the large side because we think that they're more fun in game. That we think that buildings and ships and things, these expensive items, should cost millions or tens of millions or more of the in-game currency rather than like, hey, I bought my ship for 2. It just feels less fun. All that means is that the price of the individual sway is lower. I think that's not such a big deal.
Also, another way to look at it is that one of the things we put into that decision about what the initial sale price would be, what the sale price would be, was that looking at other games similar to ours and their sort of overall, where they're at, what their market cap might look like, we picked something that was sort of, appropriate for that, for the total initial market cap of Sway. So that's where that lands. Darius has a great question. Is the value of the initial seeded items on AP taken into account in any of these Sway allocations? And the answer is absolutely yes. But the way to look at it is that there's going to be a 32.5 billion Sway at launch minted that will go to the marketplace buy orders that we're going to be seeding. So we'll be seeding the materials themselves as sell orders on the marketplaces on Adalia Prime, and we'll also be placing a bunch of buy orders, obviously above the sell orders, otherwise that wouldn't work, so that there's liquidity on both sides of the order book there. So if you want to create those materials and sell them into our buy orders, that's great. If you want to buy them off the marketplace and then later sell them for less to us, that's also great. You can do whatever you want with those orders, but we're going to be having 32.5 billion Sway allocated for that across all of the materials that are on the marketplaces.
Yeah, I can answer that, Trudexy. So that component, when we originally were first talking about Sway, was related to the crew assignments that were available for the Arva crewmates, both citizens and specialists. That portion now is going to be allocated with a pretty substantial base portion of it going to the crewmate itself, and then the remainder going to the asteroids that are in the same wallet as that crewmate. Based on its size, based on its surface area. And this is specifically for those first 11,100 asteroids that were part of the first 2 sales.
I kind of want to just add a little bit here. I mean, we went back and forth on this a lot, but from kind of a story perspective and lore, this is about the 11,100 people that were on the RVAD. And, they're coming to Adalia. They're now claiming these asteroids and saying, hey, Prime Council, I want to develop these to help the colony survive. So, those crewmates need that Sway to be able to produce, a settlement on these far-reaching asteroids. And so it only made sense to also gear kind of total Sway by size of asteroid as well, if you think about, it's going to support more people. So, having that base rate plus the amount of Sway attached to how large the asteroid is, just really fair in all regards and fit the story really well from where we intended it to be. Okay, we got someone who wants to come up on stage. I'm going to bring up Max. I know you as another name, but we'll go
Max
with
Rostansky.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm just too lazy to type. So a question regarding the starter packs. So if someone wants to buy either a specialist or an EA asteroid off secondary, how does that work with the starter pack? Like, what is the starter pack tied to? Is it tied to the rock? Is it tied to the crew? Is it completely separate and you don't get that if you buy off a secondary? Like, how's that work?
Yeah, good question. Our rival sales starter packs are and have always been tied to the asteroid itself. Then the sway, the crew assignment, crew Arvod crew related sway is tied to both in the sort of formula that we described earlier.
Okay, cool. So if you buy an EA asteroid off secondary before launch, then you also get the starter pack.
Yes, correct.
Cool. Great. And then follow up, but not really related. I'm not caught up on all the AMAs, but are we still using cartridge going forward? Like, what's going on with the cartridge thing?
Yeah, so cartridge is one of our wallet options. We've also been working pretty closely with Argent-X to incorporate session keys with them as well. And then we also support Bravos. There may be more, but certainly those three will be supported at launch.
Cool. Yeah, because the cartridge thing turned out to be great during the last test net as far as not having your wallet pop up every 2 freaking seconds and having to approve.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
cool.
we have that now in place with Argent-X as well. It's obviously still a browser extension, so I think in some ways not. It's a bit of a different experience, but maybe one that Web3 native users are a bit more used to. But they are both there. They both have session capabilities. I believe Bravos will ultimately as well. So we're hoping for a really nice, clean, smooth gaming experience from all of those.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Just to fill in questions here, do you have do you want to give a little bit of an explanation of how the sort of volatility inflation works, Chris? I think that's a popular question that people have had.
Yeah, so for anybody who is looking at the tokenomics stock and maybe you read the other one and you're just like, well, I just want to know what changed. There is a summary section at the bottom that just describes what changed since V1, which can be helpful. But specifically, I think what we've done is really simplify the model quite a bit and streamline a lot of the gameplay, rather than having to worry about, when you go to a marketplace, okay, well, there's this fee piece that goes partially to the dev fund, partially to community treasury, that goes back to activity incentives, and some of it goes to ACC, and then there's another piece that goes to the market owner. There's sort of a lot of overhead with that, and I think would make dealing with markets a little bit less fun. And so what we ultimately decided on was to pull all of that out and just take a look at Sway as a whole and say, okay, well, how much is Sway being used? What's the demand for Sway? And the term for this in economics is the velocity. Ultimately, you're looking at how often does a single average Sway change hands during some period. And that's the velocity of Sway. And so all we're doing is looking at the velocity of Sway, and if it gets too high, that's an indication that there is more demand for Sway than there was. And if that's the case, more is emitted. And that emission is the only place that Sway is minted across the board. And it's minted specifically to try to encourage that velocity of money to fall back towards a long-term average. And the idea there being that will impact the price and pull it back down, reducing ultimately the velocity of the money. I think it's pretty clean. We've done sort of like a lot of scenarios. We've run a lot of scenarios by it. I think it's fairly robust. There's a lot of levers that can be pulled beyond just the fundamental fact that it's a market, and markets are very good at regulating themselves. We think it's a pretty solid approach to building a token that is not intended to be speculative and is intended to grow with the activity level that it's supporting.
Chris, to further this question, Darius, I see your question, but I'm going to go to Brockmar first, as it's kind of in line with the same subject. Why does the sway emission take place on L1 and not on L2?
It's a good question. We've thought a lot about that. Ultimately, I think because we are inheriting security from L1, and because there exists the possibility, if we're building Sway to be this, to have this sort of emission stream that can go in possibly many different places. I brought up something in general earlier, that as the DAO takes over the management of that Sway emission stream over the longer term, they could decide that a portion should go to a new game that's being developed. Could be the case that that new game isn't on StarkNet. It could be on a different chain. It could be on an app-specific chain. Maybe it's on Arbitrum instead, or Optimism, or what have you. And in that case, it makes sense to, I guess, decentrally centralize the emission of Sway onto layer one, where ultimately it can be responsible for handling the overall total supply across any chain. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't get to L2 quite quickly. It will. Part of the emission process will entail that Sway being sent via the bridge pretty immediately to L2 to be further distributed via activity incentives and so on.
Yeah, and that's activity incentives, for those who may not know, include things that are like basically the PvE rewards in game. So we can incentivize you to complete quests or missions, and you will earn rewards to do that. Okay, so yeah, the next question from Darius was, what was the thinking behind EA starter packs and adding more ships for medium and larges, and having the skins attached versus being separate?
Good question. I think one of the things we did was take a look at with the starter packs, the kind of the distribution of those asteroids, and how quite massive really the variation is in price, and how much ultimately they were purchased for. And it felt appropriate to have the rewards for the starter pack to be increased somewhat for the mediums and larges. And so we ultimately felt that in many cases, those asteroids were going to be used for larger groups, for alliances, corporations. And so having those additional ships would kind of help jumpstart those rocks as well, for kind of the entire group. As far as the skins, well, first of all, and this is maybe something that people remember. I don't even remember how long ago this was, maybe 14 months ago or something. We had quite a few conversations back and forth about ship skins versus ships. We did ultimately settle on ships themselves for the arrival sale starter packs. Originally, if you remember, the what was part of the starter pack was an actual skin, and we felt like combining those would create a really unique, I think, valuable ship that will be in the game day one. And I think people will get a real kick out of seeing these like increasingly rare ships flying around the belt right off the bat. I mean, like there were only 4 largest. There will only ever be 4 of these large ship skins, 250 or so of the mediums, about 1,500 of the smalls, and that's it. They'll never be around again. And so we really wanted them to be out there and seen.
Yeah, I would also just like to further add the fact that, like, why we're doing, if you have a medium or a large, you get more ships. It was simply because, you spent a lot more on one asteroid versus buying 10 small asteroids for the same, cumulative price. So, it felt fair to do that. So I think overall it's a good add, and we're not really trying to like overpower these large assets. It's just that some people chose to buy many small ones versus one large one, and we wanted to even that out a bit.
Yep. Another interesting question, Chris. Do you want to go in a little bit into detail about minting crewmates from Arbad, older asteroids, crew assignments, and bridging, and sort of how those all play together, what you have to do when, what our final decisions on all those were?
Yeah, so we went back and forth on this quite a bit, but ultimately we've settled in a place where you will be not required, but very strongly encouraged to mint all of your crewmates, claim your sway prior to bridging. Those associated assets will not disappear when you bridge them over to StarkNet. If you brought them back, they would again be mintable, but they will not be mintable on StarkNet. And so we think you're strongly encouraged to do so before moving. Proto, what am I missing?
The crew assignments.
Crew assignments, yeah. So one major change, which I think a lot of people will be excited about, is that we are moving crewmates to L2. They will be performed in much the same way as you've seen the Adalian recruitment flow in the test phases. So if you have an RVOD crewmate, you'll be performing your crew assignment. If you have your Adalian recruitment, you'll be going down that road. But it does mean that everybody's going to have the opportunity to do that one more time if they want. So if you feel like the game design has changed substantially, you would have made different decisions than the ones that you originally made for your crew assignment, you are going to have an opportunity to redo that on L2 after you've bridged.
I think this is an important note for people who may have already done their crew assignments before we really knew what all the impacts of the traits were going to be that you get from those crew assignments. And in fact, we still don't, for some of them, have a full, complete, perfect sense of how those are going to impact game mechanics. So at launch, when you bridge your crewmate over, you will have a full sense of all of those traits and what they do, what the actual numbers are. At that point, you will be fully equipped to make those decisions however you want to, either from a role-playing perspective or from a min-maxing perspective. You'll have all the information available you need to, and that's partly why we decided to re-allow doing these crew assignments, because you just didn't have all the information previously to make those decisions.
I want to also make a note here. I think it's very important. It says it in the docs multiple times, but for anyone here, I'll just say it again. In order to claim any of the sway from that crew assignment bucket from an asteroid, you still need a crewmate. So if you just own an asteroid, or you have an asteroid in one wallet and your crewmate in another, that will not work. You can claim the crewmate sway, no problem. But for the asteroids, you need to pair them with a crewmate. So just really make sure that you're paying attention to that.
And to be clear about that, it's not like you have to match up the crewmate that came with an asteroid or anything. It's just you literally need a crewmate in order to claim from the asteroid. I think that's correct, right, Chris? Like the crewmate is just like your portal to claiming the asteroid money. So you just need one to do that. It's not a pairing in any particular other way.
And for anybody curious about that choice, we want people to play. We care about people who are going to play. That is our first thought, our foremost thought. If you just have asteroids, it doesn't really look like you're going to play. So we want you to have your crewmate, mint your crewmate. If you don't have one, get one. Get the sway for all of those asteroids plus your crewmates, and then play.
One additional question regarding this sway: it'll be claimable forever, correct, on layer 1? Is there a time limit on that?
We don't have a time limit currently, no.
So people can feel free to leave their asteroids where they want to if they care to leave them on layer 1, and that'll be available indefinitely.
Yes.
Name change, yeah. Darius is asking about where we are at on that, and I think the answer is we haven't decided yet.
Yeah, that is undecided, but it is definitely an ongoing conversation, and it's possible.
Make your thoughts known, everybody, if you have a strong opinion either way. Freckmore is asking.
So there's a question about we'll have to pay gas fees to bridge our enormous amount of asteroids and crewmates. First of all, thank you for having an enormous amount of asteroids and crewmates. Second of all, yes, unfortunately, they do need to get over to StarkNet. The bridging process is fairly inexpensive, but it does, of course, involve like a NFT transfer. So there is some cost involved there. If you remember when we originally brought up Sway and we started talking about crew assignments and the Sway for that, a portion of the reason for that was to try to alleviate some of that concern. We knew that you were going to need to bridge them. So we said, okay, here's an incentive, here's some sway, bring it over to StarkNet and play with that. The other thing I'll say, Sunday night is a good time. We're going to make that bridging process about as easy as possible for, I think, for anybody who has less than 100 total assets, it's a single click. If you have more, then it's number of assets divided by 100 clicks. So it should be a pretty simple and easy process.
If we were having this conversation, in say fall of 2021, we might be having a different conversation. But at the moment, it's pretty affordable.
Sure. And we may be trying to figure out all sorts of tricky storage-proof solutions to solve for that.
Yep. And so Nicola's asking, so Sway crewmates and asteroids will be on layer 1, and we have to bridge them to layer 2. For all existing crewmates and asteroids, correct, they are on layer 1 currently because they were sold on previous sales, and they will need to be bridged. And for any asteroids that are sold in the upcoming April 11th to April 18th sale, those will also be on layer 1. After that point, all Adalian crewmates and all asteroids will be sold on layer 2. So those don't need to be bridged since they're natively on layer 2. Everything today and everything from the upcoming sales will need to be bridged.
I'm monitoring questions here.
I'm not sure if there's a question about whether crewmates and asteroids on testnet will be tradable on OpenSea as NFTs. There's a couple thumbs down. Depending on the reason for that question, they are available to be traded on OpenSea testnet. If that's what you're interested in, they will not in any way be tradable on mainnet OpenSea.
They have no value in terms of speculative value or secondary value. They were free assets, and they will remain free assets, which any player will be able to attain in the testnet over time.
Although, given the price of Gorilla ETH, who knows?
I don't know if anyone saw that thread that someone bought a Bored Ape with Gorley ETH.
Really?
This space.
Yeah, they transferred like 550,000 Gorley ETH or something onto the exchange, sold it, and then bought a Bored Ape or something like that.
To answer Jush's question, or just Josh, I'm not sure how you'd pronounce that. No, you don't have to complete the crew assignment on L1. I would actually encourage you to, because you can go through the process and play around with it. You will still be able to re-roll that on L2, or you can just not do it and wait until L2.
An important earlier question from Jush too, like Sway can only be claimed on layer 1. Yes, that's how this is going to work. The sale will be on layer 1, the claiming will be on layer 1, and then you'll have to bridge over.
Yeah, and maybe it makes sense briefly to talk about like why that is philosophically. If you've taken a look at the new tokenomics document, we talk about two types of assets: an Adalian asset and an Etherean asset. Adalian assets being those that can only ever live inside of the influence sandbox. So materials on the asteroids primarily, the resources in the game, buildings, etc. And then we talk about Etherean assets, which are kind of a hybrid that can interact in the larger, StarkNet ecosystem, but also in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think these are typically the most important assets that you will see as the most valuable to you. And so I think it makes perfect sense for these from day one to be bridgeable back to L1 for safekeeping, for potentially trading around with other players. So we've prioritized ensuring that those quote Etherean assets are on L1 and can always be brought back to L1. And so that's sort of the benefit that you get, although there's a little bit of pain with the gas fees required to bridge them over in the first place.
Yeah, that's part of the security guarantee of a layer 2 period, is that you can always bridge back to layer 1 or escape hatch from layer 1. That's something else we're going to be working on is escape hatch logic on the bridge contract on layer 1, so that if StarkNet ever actually went down, those assets could be brought out on layer 1 still. StarkNet couldn't hold them hostage or anything.
I know there was some talk about name re-rolling. I don't think it's been decided on, but just so everyone knows, yeah, I think it is being considered.
Yeah, we answered that, JP. We said the
Sorry.
same.
I had to
No
run
worries.
for a second.
Yeah, I'm already seeing some agreement with the renaming of crewmates, so we'll take that under consideration.
Yeah, we've actually had the conversation even as far as it affects trust, as well as how we would handle that within the UI to ensure that you could kind of always link back a crewmate or a crew back to their previous names, so you could know very well that that's the untrustworthy pirate you dealt with in the past and not some new face.
Yeah, crew names in particular are going to be very interesting, and we'll have more to say on that before too long.
I might be able to get to change some of my crewmate names that don't match their class. I think I have someone that's a pilot name, but they're a minor, and I'm like, God, I wish I could change that.
One thing to note about names and other things that you can do with asteroids or crewmates on layer 1 is that there will be a certain point after which we're going to start ignoring that on layer 1, and layer 2 will be the sort of source of truth for those changes. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Chris.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a maybe a bit technical, but the sort of pathway for us to move on to L2 will initially entail sort of a freezing of the contracts on L1, at which point we'll no longer utilize them. The client will no longer be connected to them. Changing names on them would be pointless. And we'll be initially seeding all of those names onto L2 to ensure that they can be considered unique, because that is one of the restrictions we have, is that names are unique. So that'll be sort of our migration pathway to getting started on StarkNet. I was actually going to mention that. Yeah, we are going to be taking a look at the character set as well. A lot of the changes to Gyro 1 are allowing for a little bit more expressive use of storage space. Obviously, expanding the character set, depending on how much we want to expand it, will entail the use of more storage space. But the great thing about being on StarkNet, being on L2, is that gets cheaper and cheaper. So we're certainly going to explore that.
I would say apostrophes, hyphens, and diacriticals are probably top of our list.
Honestly, I think even within UTF-8, we actually have a fair amount of space to expand and add some of those special characters. But we may even explore going outside of that. Maybe not wingdings.
We've got about another 10 minutes, or I think, until questions really start slowing down. But something I wanted to mention too, guys, is we know this is a lot of information to digest, and a lot of docs were dropped today. So we fully expect there will be plenty more questions to come. The team will be here and ready to help you guys and give insight to, all of this. And there's also a lot more to come. So, prior to April 11th, we'll make sure if anything is not as clear as it needs to be, we'll, provide additional clarity, and we'll make sure to work with you guys to make all of this as digestible as possible.
Trying to understand your question there, Illyrium, about ideas for ways to spend Sway before it becomes tradable. I'm not sure what spend means if you can't transfer it. If you have any further questions along those lines.
Oh, okay. So it means related to, so Parallel had like sort of, I guess, non-game impactful, a few non-game impactful things that you could do with Prime. Although I think probably JP could talk more about that because he's more involved with that community.
I probably don't want to talk much about Prime or Parallel at this point. No, nothing wrong with them. I just don't want to really confuse anyone more with multiple tokens in this conversation.
Yeah, I think I'll just
Yeah.
say that Sway is not going to be tradable until launch, and will probably not necessarily intend to be spendable on anything until then.
Yeah, I mean, our major focus is launching the game. If we somehow realized that like we had a bunch of excess time, perhaps we would try to incorporate something like that. But I think that it would certainly be a lower priority than our focus for launching in summer.
Yeah, and I think one point to go onto that is just that anything that Sway can be used on prior to the game fully launching would still need to be like game mechanic. You can't just have Sway tradable because that makes it, more speculative because there's not any game actions happening around it. So we would have to be very careful if we did implement anything like that.
One thing I will make a call out here at this point, just if you own Asteroids or Crew currently, like mainnet layer 1 Asteroids or Crew right now, do make sure to check out how much Sway you may have claimable for those. I think it's more than a lot of people thought, so just you can check that on OpenSea. You can also check it, the numbers are there in the documents we shared this morning, so be sure to check that out.
Yes, they are all up to date. All crewmates, all asteroids, metadata is all up to date now. So you should see that information in the various trading arenas that exist.
Yeah, I think Travis or the TND team Stark site might be in this call, but I'm going to reach out to them because I think it would be great to have in our channels that Sway now listed as one of the pieces there.
Yeah, I see Travis here.
Oh, if you can hear us, we would love that, and I'll reach out to you and we can talk about that. Okay, so start. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate that. Well, I'm seeing questions are slowing down now. So, we're not trying to keep you here any longer than you have to be, but we're really excited to announce all this stuff. We're really excited about launching the game. And honestly, maybe there's a perfect asteroid out there for you that you don't already have. Look now and add it to your watch list, I think is what I would say. That would be on the actual L1 game client, which is in official links. Remember that watch list allows you to just kind of toggle and save any of those asteroids, which is super helpful because we know, as in previous sales, things can get kind of hectic, and it's good just to know if you want to purchase something that you don't have to fight for it. It's already just on your list and you're ready to go.
Yep, and also just a reminder that if you want to participate in the Sway ready for launch sale, do make sure that you have Asteroids or Crew. You need at least one of either to participate. So that will be something you need to do. And again, primary sales for Asteroids will be opening at the same time as the Sway sale. So make sure to if you need something and you don't want to buy it off secondary, that will be available as well. So.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, there was a question I received in a direct message that kind of applies to this. Someone was concerned about Aelin being gameable, and they're wondering if they have an asteroid and they swap it to another wallet after purchasing Sway, whether or not that asteroid becomes possible to buy Sway again.
So I'll address a couple of things about Aelin real quick. So first of all, no, Aelin does not take snapshots, but it does mark assets as used. So you're not going to be able to use an asteroid or buy $2,500 worth of sway, send it to somebody else, and expect that they will also be able to use it. It's only usable once. I actually really like that. I think snapshots in this case would be very gameable and potentially piss a lot of people off who buy something expecting they'll be able to use it for sway and then they can't. The other thing I think, which is a pretty cool feature of Alien that pretty much eliminates any of the need for the first come first serve craziness, is that there is a cap. There will be a cap of 15 billion sway, but if it's reached, it can go past. If it goes past when the sale concludes, any additional funds will be sent back to the buyer, and then people will receive their sway on a pro rata basis. So, if you spent 1%, regardless of whether that 1% was exactly the cap or if it was way over the cap, you will get 1% of that 15 billion sway. Which I think is pretty nice because we've all been in first come first serve situations. Both of our sales were actually that case, although I think given that there's a fair amount of effort required to choose your asteroid, we were a little bit better insulated from that craziness than most. Testnet asteroid prices are not up to date. I'll get them updated soon so that they can reflect roughly what will be expected for April.
Yeah, maybe Chris, you want to emphasize pricing in ETH and how that is kind of pegged towards sale?
Yeah, so we'll peg that in ETH just prior to the sale, usually like a few hours. That's what we had done the last 2 times. I know that it does expose us to some volatility risk, both us as well as you guys. But apparently so does USDC. So ultimately, we're an Ethereum first L1 game. And I think it makes sense for us to continue using Ether as sort of our base asset.
See any other last minute questions here? I think you guys have killed it with the questions. I think that's about it. We're coming right in an hour, so maybe we'll give one more minute here, see if any last minute questions, guys. Last call. We're closing the tap here soon.
I feel like we're like right on the border of getting into a conversation about the U.S. government and banks. So probably a good idea to wrap it up soon.
It was a bit of a joking question, but Proto, maybe you want to just give some information like what resources are going to be the most lucrative. Now, taking away the word lucrative, can you give some thoughts around resources within the game and how you're balancing those?
Oh boy, that's a whole AMA into itself. But basically, if you're looking for something that's lucrative, what you need to find is something that is out of balance with everything else. Like for example, if for some reason nobody was producing graphite, suddenly that's going to be more lucrative than something that everybody else is producing. These things float. It's a market economy, so look for opportunities there. In terms of like saying, oh, gold is going to be more valuable than this. Like, yes, absolutely on a per kilogram basis, but the market cap of gold and influence in Adalia is not necessarily going to be any higher than that of concrete or of any other material. So I think that'll probably be enough. As much as I can say in this amount of time.
Yeah, thanks. Find gaps in the market. Otherwise, you're gonna be buying more stable goods where you're gonna really make the most sways where you find a gap in the market for sure.
Stable goods like USDC, right?
Hey, a lot of people made some good money buying it at the bottom there. So
yeah, I know.
Just confirmed.
I wish I would have put my whole bank account in.
Me too.
All right, guys. Well, one more question here. Is there a time limit for claiming sway on L1?
Not currently, no. There probably won't be. If there is, it'll be a long time from now. And it'll be well communicated and well announced in advance.
Yeah, so any rewards that would, or I guess claims of earned sway, if there's any cutoff, you'd have a very, very big warning ahead of time that it would be turned off. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming. Really excited. Lots more to come. If you have more questions, just ping us and we're happy to answer.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I can't wait to play together.
Yep. Thanks all.
Yeah, right.
Can't wait.
I have a feeling I'm gonna have a big learning curve to be good at this game.
Did I call in sick on that one streak? What does that even mean? Take care, guys.
Thanks everyone.
Everyone. Oh, I'll get the recording up for everyone on YouTube shortly.